Welcome, Elise. Welcome to the Working Mumma podcast. How's your day going so far?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Almost at the end of school holidays for us here. I've got one more day to go, and then my kids are both back at school and preschool, respectively. So, yeah, really looking forward to that. How about you?
Going well. Ours have been back a week, but it was a very short week last week with Anzac, and I don't work Mondays, and I'm going back to work tomorrow actually for a break because Mondays for me are always crazy. As working mums, we know it. They just
Yeah,
can
yeah.
certainly test you. But congratulations as well. You're a prep mum, aren't you? So you've made it through your first term.
Yes, I have made it through my first term. I prepared my daughter really well for school. I was really ready for her to go to school and she was really ready for it, and we talked about it a lot, and she was really excited to wear a uniform and make new friends, but I've failed to prepare myself, I think. So I got to the end of term one just feeling really lackluster and exhausted. So actually this school holidays has been really nice. I had the short week. So I cheated the public holidays and I took the 3 days and 10 days off. So I had a really nice chilled out time with the kids last week, which is exactly what we all needed, I think.
Very good. You say that you didn't prepare yourself. What do you mean by that?
I think that I just thought, I'd have all of this time, the I'd have 2 days a week where I didn't have any kids here. So I've been working for the last few years with kids at home. And, I thought, well, I've got 2 days a week. My son's in preschool 2 days a week. My daughter's at school 5 days a week. And I'd have these 2 days where I would just, get so much done. But I didn't prepare myself for those 6 hours feeling like they lasted for 45 minutes. So, I think I had these unrealistic expectations of what that was going to look like. And then there's all of the extra stuff on top of that, like ironing uniforms and making lunches and filling lunch boxes up and all of that kind of stuff that I kind of hadn't factored in.
Yeah, definitely that 9 till 3:30, but it's not really that of work because you've got to get
Yep.
home, but then you've also got to factor in pickup times and things like
Yep.
that. It's definitely a journey, and I think it's an adjustment. So I think it's really good that you've also acknowledged that you prepare your children, but there's also preparing ourselves as well
Yep.
in that journey.
Yep.
I felt the
For
same
sure.
thing. I wasn't prepared for prep. I was the same. All right, we'll send them off and everything will be okay. Didn't realize what the wave of compass alerts and tsunami of just everything that comes
Oh my
in.
gosh, I have a whole folder on my phone just for apps from the school. And as a marketer, it drives me insane because there's like six different apps. I'm like, is there a way that we can just integrate these
Yeah.
all together so that we're getting one information, and I don't need an email as well as the notification through the app, and then the six Facebook groups where we're getting the same information again. It's overload, and that I think that's another thing I wasn't prepared for, was
Yeah.
just that overload of information that I'm suddenly getting from the school.
And that you've got to know everything that it's about it as well, that you
Oh yeah.
instantly know. And you're like, I don't know. This is my first year of the Mother's Day
Yep.
stall. What do I need to expect?
Yep. And then my husband, I mean, he's so supportive. He does 50% of the pickups and the drop-offs, and he makes most of our dinners, and he's the reason that we've got clean clothes most of the time. But when it comes to, getting any of the notifications from the school, that all kind of falls to me, and he never really knows what's going on from week to week because I'm the one that receives all of the notifications. So yes.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So how do you manage then that communication, I guess, back to your husband?
So we have and have done for a while. I've got some final transfers on the top part of our fridge that have the days of the week and then a coming soon sort of section. Every Sunday night, I get my chalk pen out and my wipe, and I wipe off the previous week's events and everything, and then I fill the calendar out so that he knows what's coming up this week and what we have to be prepared for. So we do have, an electronic calendar which we share, but that fridge calendar is a quick visual so that he can see and he knows what's coming up in the week ahead.
And it's probably handy as well for the kids as they're learning to read. They can go,
Yes.
okay, this is what's going on, and I understand as well.
Though with my 5.5-year-old, she sees her name and she's like, why does it say my name up there? What's going on? Why is my name on the fridge?
Because you've got an activity all the
Yeah.
time.
Yep. Yep. Why is my friend's name on the fridge? Well, because you go into their party on the weekend.
You're Miss Popular. That's very good.
Yep.
Very good.
Yep.
So you said you were a marketer. What's been your career journey to get to where you are into
Oh,
motherhood as well?
so I started out in the finance industry in the very early years of my career, and then around the time I got married, so that was we just celebrated our ninth wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Um, thank you. I decided that that wasn't for me anymore, and
Any
uh,
particular reason?
the hours, the environment, I was sort of pushed into a sales role, and that's just not me. That's not who I am. And yeah, I was just really burnt out by the end of it. So I went in search of another role and I landed a marketing role at a big multinational healthcare company. Um, and then, yeah, so 2019, I fell pregnant with my daughter and she was born towards the end of 2019. And the transition back to work, so I had 15 months off with her, and the transition back to work at the start of 2021 after 15 months was a really interesting one. So the company was going through a restructure and I wasn't really sure whether I'd have a job. And it was also the end of that first 12 months of COVID. And I was really fortunate that I had an amazingly supportive manager as I returned to work. Um, and then I
So
fell pregnant.
were they supportive as well about the return to work? Do you want to just give any
Yeah, so
insights and experience on that? Because also going back to work in COVID is very different. I did it
mhm.
myself.
Yeah. So my husband had started a new job right at the very beginning, that very first weekend where all of the lockdowns came into effect
Oh
across the
my goodness.
country in 2020. It was a really wild time for us. We had been given notice on our lease and we moved in with my parents. The plan was that we'd move into their house while they were on their 6-week trip to Europe, which didn't eventuate. So we lived in my parents' dining room with all of our stuff for 3.5 months during that very first lockdown period in 2020 with a
At least you're around
six-month-old
family.
baby. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, in hindsight, it was really, really lovely, especially because we didn't have that in 2021.
Mm,
And that was a much longer lockdown, and it was really, really hard. Not even being able to have a cup of tea with my parents.
mm.
I'm very close with my parents, and that was really difficult. Um, so when I went back after my daughter, it was my manager, she was a mother. So, and she knew the struggle of, leaving your kids after, you've had all of this time off with them and then going back and finding yourself, I guess, back in the groove in the workforce. So my husband, thankfully, his work was very flexible and we were able to sort of come up with a solution that meant that we could keep our daughter at home because we were also looking for a house to buy and we didn't want to put her into childcare to only pull her out again while we were moving house because we thought that that would be, I guess, too much disruption. And thankfully, with COVID, it meant that I was able to work from home a lot of the time, and I was only working 3 days a week. So we were kind of able to make that work. And then I fell pregnant again right before the lockdowns in 2021. So we could kind of get away again with the working from home, and we were still looking for a house to buy, and it wasn't going to be in the area that we were living in. So again, didn't make sense to put her into daycare. And then, the change with having a new sibling as well. Again, we were trying to, just keep the stability
Yeah, as
for
much
her during
normality
that.
in a
Yeah,
really crazy time as what it
yeah,
is. Yep.
absolutely, absolutely. So my son was born at the start of 2022, and without sort of going into the gruesome details of it, returning to work just felt really unrealistic and insurmountable. There was just no support and no empathy for the fact that I I'd been very upfront and clear about, what my capabilities were going to be and how many days I was going to be able to return to work. And there was just they weren't willing to work with me at all.
So they weren't willing to say go part-time or flexible hours and
I was allowed to go part-time for 3 months, the initial 3 months, and then I was expected to find extra childcare for two children in that time. And I think by now we all know how difficult it is to find childcare for even one child, let alone two.
in
And
such a
even
short space of time as well.
yeah, yeah, and even with my parents helping out, my mum was looking after the kids 1 day a week, and I had my daughter in 2 days a week of preschool, and it just felt completely unrealistic and overwhelming. And so I decided to walk away. And my husband, his employer has amazing parental leave policies. So he had 12 weeks after I went back to school, back to
Amazing.
work. So he had a really big runway to find something. Um, and I was due to go back at the start of January. And then midway through December, I had, I guess, the interview, which has changed my life. And I have never looked back. Yeah, it just I'm working in a way that I didn't think that I'd be able
So
to
an
ever.
interview for a new role. So you're like
Yes.
you're at a
Yeah.
big corporate and who are really unsupportive, I guess, of working parents by the sounds of
Yeah.
it. And so you were like, did you leave straight away or did you just go like, right, I'm done. I'll look for something else?
So I had to go back for 1 day so as to not pay back my parental leave, my maternity leave payments. Um, so I went back and I did my 1 day, and then I emailed them the day after and I said, look, this is not going to work for me, so I'm going to resign. And they paid me out what I was owed, and that was that.
So they
So
didn't try and keep you, they didn't,
no,
were they supportive of other working parents or just not that's not the culture?
that really wasn't the culture from speaking to some other people who had recently returned from maternity leave. And it differed slightly from manager to manager. But overall, it was very much like, you transition our way or you transition not at all.
Away.
Mm,
That's
yeah.
shocking. And it's like that's 4 years ago now. So it's
Yeah.
relatively fresh. That's just
Yes.
blows
Well,
my
it's not
mind
even four
that
years ago. So I've been in my role now for 2.5. So it was, yeah, 2.5 years ago that this all kind of eventuated.
so the
Um,
expectation that you return back into work from maternity leave, part-time for 3 months, and then you ramp up to be full-time with no flexibility around that.
and be in the office 3 days a week. Yeah.
Wow, that's full on.
And I think actually at the time, from memory, they had a thing where they were trialing being back in the office 5 days a week. So everyone was expected to be in the office 5 days a week. So yeah, it was, I think I missed the worst of it, 2022, from what I'd heard from people that I'd spoke to, it was pretty wild. Um, but when I made the decision to leave, it wasn't a conscious decision to move away from big corporate into like a medium-sized enterprise. My, I guess, my main objective for finding a new role was that it supported the fact that I was a mother and that my family always came first, and that I wasn't just a cog in a machine, I was a human
Mm.
being. So,
What was
you
that
know,
process like? Was it really values driven to go like, right, this company's not working for me because my values have changed or priorities and things like that? Like, what
I
was
think
that thought process?
I think the crystallizing moment was because there was a series of emails that kind of went back and forth, and I felt very harassed while I was on my maternity leave. So this went on for some months in the back end of my maternity leave. And I think that the moment for me that I was like, I have to walk away from this was when I was on a phone call with HR and I said, I feel like I've been bullied. And she had the decency to look shocked, but there was no, what do you mean? Can you tell me more about that? Can you? tell me what happened. How can we fix this? Because that if you feel that way, it's not okay. And you do all of this corporate
Mm.
training that, is like if you feel bullied, it doesn't matter whether that was the intention or not. That is, you've been bullied. So yeah, that was the moment that I just I said I got off the phone call and I said to my husband, I have to leave. This is not this is not going to work for me because they don't
No.
value me as a human being and they're not even willing to enter into a conversation to make it work for both of us. And I'd been there
That-
7 years by this point.
Wow. Oh, that just absolutely surprised me in this day and age, 2.5 years ago, that as much as what we hear and we read, no, things are changing and that, but there are still some organizations out there treating
Hmm.
women and return to mothers like what we often hear about, which is just
Yeah,
shocking.
yeah,
And good employees like yourself that
yeah,
are willing to work,
yeah.
just it's often that square peg, round hole scenario.
And I feel like for myself, I need to work.
Mm.
you know it's something that I have that's just for me. No one can do. My husband can't do it. I can't ask anyone else to step in and help me with it. It's just for me, and I really love that. I really love that I have this part of my life that belongs to me. So when I met Helen, my current manager, we clicked, and she had so much empathy for the fact that I was a mother, and she understood that being there for family was my very top priority. And um, she offered me the job on the spot, actually, and she's since told me that when she was going through all of the applications for the job, that I was the top of her pile, and she doesn't know what she would have done if I said no.
That's
Oh,
amazing. You go
so
from just not feeling, I guess, validated and you're having to conform to on the spot, just
yeah,
absolutely backed. That's amazing.
yeah. So even to the point where she asked me, how are you going sorting childcare? And I said, oh, look, I've got my daughter in 2 days a week, and I'm working it out for my son. And she goes, don't worry about it. It's fine.
Wow.
And I've got my son. My son will come in and sit on my lap and wave at everyone while we're on meetings, and it's fine. No one bats an eyelid, and it's the polar opposite.
I was about to say completely the
Yeah.
opposite and so validating for yourself as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
How did that mentally and I guess also emotionally feel of going through that? Because you've been pushed in one way, but then validated a few months later.
That was a process as well. I think that I after and it kind of dated back to my mortgage broking days as well. I'd had a series of like really negative experiences in the workplace where my contributions, I'd worked so hard and my contributions were just downplayed. And I don't know whether it's because I was a woman or because I was a mother in at the end of my last role. But yeah, that was a really sort of tough process. And there was a lot of that imposter syndrome present where I just, felt so incapable of doing everything. And every time there was a mistake, I would spiral. And this is another thing that Helen has worked through with me. She saw this immediately that I was just crashing, and I was in a tailspin, and I didn't know how to pull myself out of it. And you know, I remember vividly sitting at my dining table on a call with her and just in tears. And she's like, it's okay, we've got this. And she organized for some coaching sessions with a brilliant mindset coach. And she really helped me let go of all of those past experiences so that I could just purge it from myself and move forward so that I could thrive. And that was such a big turning point for me.
That's huge. That's
Hmm.
amazing that you've actually got a manager that's recognized it and
Hmm.
but it's also that, yeah, the mindset that comes into it that you've obviously had a few different scenario like situations in work that it's not necessarily your skills, but some of that other element around mindset. And mindset is such a huge component in so many ways.
Absolutely.
I've done some work in the last couple of years, and it's transformed the way that I look at things. That there might have been something I would have spiraled myself, and now I'm like, okay, but what's the evidence for this? And if
Yeah.
I'm failing, what's the evidence? And what's the
Yeah.
stories? And now I've got some of the tools that I can then use in it. But before
Yeah.
that, imposter syndrome, number one candidate here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing, and I still use this as a tool today, the biggest thing that she taught me was, if you really want to let something go, where are you holding that tension in your body? And for me, it's at
Ah,
the base of my neck. And she goes, okay, so close your eyes and pretend there's a door at the base of your neck and open it up and just let it all flow out. And it's something that I use often to really bring myself back to the present moment and to stop myself from going down these rabbit holes. Because as mothers, we do that. We go down these rabbit holes, where the kids don't have any clean pants and all of a sudden you've, flashed forward 20 years and they're living under a bridge because you didn't wash the pants today, like there's all of these things along the way. And because you failed in this one, very small and insignificant thing on one day that you won't remember in 20 years, you've manifested this whole future where you failed them. And I think, yeah, that mindset piece is so important to bring yourself back into the moment and realize that it's not all that bad.
so how do you help manage that on a regular basis now? Because it's something that, yeah, spiraling like that and doing those oh my God, like today I was like, oh my God, my kids don't do their homework, they're gonna fail and blah blah blah. Like,
I think it really, that technique of just letting it all go and taking a big deep breath. I think, that big deep breath and just letting it all flow out and just stopping for a moment, that's something that really helps me to kind of come back to the moment. And you go to like Chili Healer from Bluey,
yeah,
that episode where she just goes, I just need 20 minutes when no one's near me, and having
so
everyone in the
relatable.
house
Yeah.
understand that time and that space and that moment to take a breath is really important for everyone.
Mm.
We don't, then all of those feelings don't escalate. And, it's something that I use with my kids. Okay, well, do you just need a minute? You can go and have a minute. It's fine. You're not in trouble, but if you need to just take a minute, do that. So I
You've got
think, yeah,
permission, go for it.
yeah, yeah. And having permission and having everyone understand that that's a mechanism for coping and regulating those emotions is really important.
Oh, that's fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing as well, because that's quite vulnerable of you. And I'm sure that many people listening are actually very going, yeah, I've felt like that. I'm listening to some of this going,
Yeah.
tick, 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 tick. So, how do you think as well that of going from an organization with full-time hours expectation to going to an organization now that has, work from home, flexible hours, pretty much the polar opposite, really reframed what your belief is around, and I get free your belief and also the outcomes of part-time workers, because I know you're pretty passionate about part-time employees as well.
Yeah. So
It's right. Get on your
I've
soapbox.
done
You're
both.
allowed to do
Yeah. Yeah. I will get on my
it.
soapbox. Yes. So I've obviously done both. I've done both. And then towards the end of, like, when I was heavily pregnant with my son, I did a few months of full-time work while parenting, while working from home and moving house and, all of the
And
moving
COVID and
pieces.
everything else
And
in the
yeah,
middle.
like
Yeah.
everything else. So I've done both. And I really strongly disagree with this sentiment that presence is more important than productivity. And so my employment contract, for example, is to work 25 hours per week. And I work my hours in a way that works for my family. And it gives me a day off to spend with my son. So I work school hours 9 to 3, Monday to Thursday. And then I just will do, a quick email check a few times on a Friday on my phone. And then, in school holidays, I can take 6 hours of leave each week, and I can have my mum look after the kids for a day, and then I can do a few hours, a couple in the morning and one in the afternoon for the rest of the day and have whole days with my kids. So as long as those 25 hours in some way are being fulfilled, I can still do my work. And I've come to realize that and maybe this is in bigger organizations, I was that aforementioned cog in the machine, and I wasn't a human being. I was just playing such a small part in the bigger picture. But in my current role, I have both influence and opportunity to develop my skills, and I'm impactful. I'm doing meaningful work, and I got out of my own way and I shook off all of these systemic beliefs that mothers couldn't possibly deliver meaningful impact. And in my role now, I get to shape strategy in a way that I never used to, and that's something that I feel really passionate about. Um, I've, I've written awards applications for, like the Telstra Best of Business Awards, something that I'd never done 2 years ago. And, we reached state finals for the Telstra Business Awards, but that was such a great experience for me to really have a, a big picture look at our strategy and our brand and how we needed to frame it for our target audiences. And um, I think because I've worked with Helen to come up with a mutually beneficial arrangement, that's why it works. I get to be the mother that I want to be, whilst also having that my job that is only for me. And mums just they know how to get stuff done. And I think that people forget that.
Yeah.
Like we start our motherhood journey off learning how to optimize the time while our babies sleep. And I did a LinkedIn post on this last week. We know how to balance, the needs of a toddler with a newborn, and how to, fit things into a car, and the time management and all of that. We know how to we maternity leave isn't just coffee dates and
No.
picnics. It's we are honing all of these skills that we can translate into a professional setting.
Oh, 100%. The emotional intelligence, the emotional regulation of so many things of what you see in workplaces, you see so much and you use those skills on a daily
Hmm.
basis. Although
Yeah.
I'm still yet to work out how to negotiate successfully with a 4-year-old, or probably successfully negotiate better with probably a 34-year-old than or a 44-year-old than a 4-year-old, but still working on that one. But
It's
there are
that's
so
all in the marketing, I think. I come back to this all the time. We went to a wildlife park once, and my daughter, we were talking about what we should have for lunch on the way home, and I said, "Oh, do you want a ham and cheese toastie?" "No, I don't want that." And I go, "Well, do you want a crock burger then?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I want a crock burger." A crock burger was a ham and cheese
yeah.
toastie. But like it's all in the marketing. It's
Yeah.
it's that reframing of the product
Yeah.
to negotiate with them. So that's something that you can try, but
Yeah.
they're
Understanding your
they're
target market.
unpredictable little things, aren't they?
They sure are. They sure are. But I guess at times so is work in many, many
Yes,
ways.
true.
So, why do you think as well that shame and guilt are so common for working mums? And how can we start breaking that cycle? Because I also know this is another topic that you're pretty
Yeah.
passionate about.
I I really think we've been conditioned to believe that we need to show up as a mother, as a wife, as an employee, and we've never actually stopped to challenge those beliefs and where they come from. We're not stopping to question what working actually means for us. So, like I said, for me, I love being a mum. It's something that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be a mum. But my job is somewhere where I can stretch my brain and showcase my expertise and be really creative and, have contact with other human beings that, don't want to listen to the same songs or read the same books or, watch the same episode of Bluey over and over again. And having that part of me that's just for me, it makes me a better mum. Um, And I think, again, that part-time work equals less committed to the job rhetoric. It makes us feel like we're copying it from all sides because there's also a bit of a generational aspect, I think. So in previous generations, we've had like my mum didn't work until I was in high school, and you know, my husband's grandmothers didn't work, and they had, they either had the option to not work from a financial perspective, which is not the reality for so many, well, I'd say the majority of
Mm,
families.
agreed.
Um, or there just wasn't, in the case of like our grandmothers or our grandparents' generation, there just wasn't a place for them in the workforce. Once you had a baby,
Mm.
once you were a mother, that was it.
Yeah,
That was
there's,
it.
I think it was like 50 years ago, as soon as you were married, you were like in
Hmm.
the government services, you actually had to resign.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, yeah, there's this, we're copying all of these opinions about the way that we should mother, or we should, be an employee, and we're copying it, and it feels like we can't do anything right. We can't be 100% of anything. And so I
Mm.
think that's where a lot of the shame and the guilt comes from.
Yeah, these societal expectations around what, the good mother is. But it's
Hmm.
actually then also, I did an episode with Dr. Sophie Brock around the good enough mother. Like, there's no such
Hmm.
thing as a perfect mum, but we can still be the good enough mum where we don't have to try and do everything and be everything to everyone. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if our kids or child is happy and fed and we're happy as well and content in ourselves, that's also what counts. Like,
Absolutely.
that
And
doom
that's
scrolling is just not doing any good at all.
absolutely. And that's the one thing that I've said to, my friends who have become mothers after me, or my sisters-in-law who have become mothers after me. My litmus test for my kids is, are they happy? Are they safe? And are they loved? And if I'm doing all three of those, and they are all three of those things, then we're doing okay. If they're
Yep.
happy, they're safe, and they're loved. And that's all kids need. They just need to be happy, be safe, and be loved.
Yep. And they want that hug at the end of the day and the good night kiss and things
Absolutely.
like that. And look,
Yeah.
that's ultimately what's there. We don't. And I think as well, as you're saying about the full-time versus part-time, it's like if you've got your like, as you said, previous generations, yeah, previous generations used to think they need to slog it out for 60, 80 hours a week at the desk when really, what's the point of it? You know?
Hmm.
As you said earlier, it's sometimes just another cog in the wheel and things like that. So, but you can actually be more productive sometimes also by working less hours because, as you know how to get this stuff done. You don't need to be around the water
Yeah.
cooler and 24/7 and things like that. But you can actually then focus on the outputs. And when sometimes you change your priorities of hours versus outputs, as like what we have to do, with particularly working part time, you've got to get in, get that stuff done.
Yeah.
It's such a different mentality and different focus of, okay, what am I need? What are my deliverables? Right, there we go. I'm really focused.
Yeah. And this, I think, is where employers also need to reframe a bit as well, and not everything is a priority. Not everything can be a priority. So, what is the priority? What are the things that have to get out the door this week? And I
Mm.
think that empowerment is such an important piece that is missing in so many workplaces. People don't feel empowered to prioritize and speak up and say, hey, I have to go and pick my kids up from school.
Why don't
So
you think we have that? Is it just that we need managers like to lead loudly and say, like, right, they're leading the office or coming in a little bit later and saying, look, I've done this to pick up my kids or something. Like, how can we get more empowerment to support working parents?
I don't think it's just on managers. I think it's on everyone. I think from the top down, from the bottom up, we all need to be loud, and we really need to start shining a light on the issue, because the fact is so many people have children. We have 4 weeks of annual leave in Australia as standard. We have 12 weeks of school holidays. So even with two parents who work full time, so that's not even including, you know, mothers who work part-time, my annual leave is prorated for the hours that I work. So I don't have a full, you know,
Mm. 4 weeks a year, yeah.
4 weeks a year. So the math just doesn't math in
Yeah.
in that scenario, and I think that we really need to start to really be loud about these what it means to be a working parent because it isn't like it was in previous generations where, one parent likely wasn't working. So I think it it isn't just on managers to lead. We can all be leaders in this. We can all start to speak up and say, hey, I've got to go and pick my kid up from school because, my partner can't do that today. Not just mums, but dads as well, and it's something that I'm constantly on my husband about. You've got to be loud. Hey, I have to leave. My wife can't pick up the kids today. She's got a meeting or I have to go and pick up my kids from school.
Mm. Is there anything else that you think that would also help in relation to, I guess, that empowerment? And you've had two almost polar opposite experiences of a workplace. What would you then say that you'd love to see in more organizations? And I would say small and large, that, it's not really one or the other that are probably doing it better.
I think that when we're talking about flexible work, it we actually have to challenge that, I guess, that phrasing because a lot of these flexible arrangements aren't actually flexible. So, and I think it extends beyond working mums and working parents. I think that these policies that allow for flexibility for, working location or non-linear hours or part-time hours, they're actually really about inclusivity. So they're inclusive for parents who have to go and pick their kids up or they need to be working from home so they can make it from a meeting to school pickup on time. They're inclusive for people who have elderly relatives that they have to care for. And, they don't want to be in an office environment where everyone's
Mm.
spreading germs during winter. You know, they're inclusive for people with disabilities, neurodiverse people who don't function well in open plan offices with lots of noise and fluorescent lighting. And I think that organizations, the one thing that I would really love is for organizations and workplaces to really examine what these flexible policies mean, because they have to go further than just a line in a policy.
And it's a lot more than just hours or
Definitely.
days of the week. Like, there's so much more about
Yeah.
flexibility when you think about it.
Yeah.
As you say, to support all, in a marketing speak, all the different customer employees, the employee profiles that would be out there. And there are
Hmm.
many, many, many different ones that are there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is it now? Actually, quickly, is there something about juggling career and motherhood that has caught you completely off guard that you didn't expect or face? And how did you work through it?
So definitely the school routine and that huge shift. So I like I said, I spent a lot of time preparing my daughter, and ensuring a smoother transition for her, but I forgot about myself. And yeah, so that was one of the unexpected things. But I think too the other unexpected thing when I was thinking about this question was how invisible I became to my colleagues while I was on maternity leave. Like they're these people that you work with every day and you share experiences with them and you get to know them on a more personal level. And then suddenly they just evaporate from your life. They don't contact you, you don't hear from them. And so you're not only learning how to be a mum, but you're also trying to build a new support network
Mm.
at the same time. So I think that was something that really caught me off guard when it came to work and being a mother and how those two worlds didn't collide.
Yeah, often it's,
Yeah,
yeah, the Venn diagram didn't really exist. And
yeah,
sometimes that's
yeah,
sad as well that, yeah, that
yeah. And I
happened.
don't know whether that's a common experience, but it certainly was mine. These people that
Mm.
I sat next to and, you know, we'd talk and we knew each other's partners and pets' names and all of this. And then all of a sudden that was
Wow.
that. And then I think too, for me, it was even harder because I was doing it during COVID. It
Mm.
was really hard to build any bonds or, I couldn't go out and meet other mums. So it was a really isolating experience. to not even have the stability of those relationships that I built at work to
Yeah.
rely on.
Yeah. Geez, you've had
Mm.
definitely some interesting experiences of definitely working motherhood. So,
Yes.
what does a typical day for you look like now in juggling work, family, kids, life, mental load, you name it?
So the one thing that I found really helpful and that I would recommend to all parents that have to make lunch boxes is to do it the night before. So it makes that morning routine really so much more calm. Like the couple of times that I've been like, it'll be fine. I'll do it in the morning. It's totally thrown everything out because you're trying to do that while you're trying to get breakfast and do up buttons and, like appease meltdowns and all of
Yeah.
that. So, so that there's just nothing worse than starting your day feeling in a panic and feeling rushed. So I make the lunch boxes the night before. Um, Something I really try and prioritize is my sleep because if I don't get enough sleep, I'm useless. And I really try and nourish my body. It's something that I could definitely do better at, but I do try and eat food that is nourishing. And I've worked with a brilliant dietitian um, who has sort of helped me navigate that in the context of motherhood as well, so that I'm not feeling like, I've got to make a whole separate meal for myself. As I said before, my husband likes to do 50% of the pickups and drop-offs. So between our two kids, we've got 14 of those a week, and he tries to do seven, and I do the other seven. And some weeks it doesn't always work out like that, but for the most part, we've sort of been able to split that equitably. And then the one thing that I've been trying to do this year is what I call the 1% rule. So 1% of 24 hours is roughly 15 minutes. So I like to spend 15 minutes doing something for me that I wouldn't otherwise get time for. And sometimes, honestly, it is just sitting on the end of the bed staring at a blank wall because I need the sensory deprivation for 15 minutes. But it might be going for a walk for 15 minutes or doing 15 minutes of yoga, but doing 15 minutes of something that isn't that's just for me and expending 15 minutes of effort into myself so that by the end of the year, I will have done 365% more for myself than I did last year.
That's amazing. I love that concept, the 1%. That is so cool. So, yes, if you're doing that and you're listening, reach out to Elise. I know she'd love to hear from you. I remember when you wrote this on LinkedIn and I was like, that is such a cool idea. Like 1% is not very much time at all.
No, it really isn't. It
15
really
minutes a
isn't.
day to yourself,
Yeah.
which I know as mums, sometimes 15 minutes a day, you're like, that's a really long time. So 15 minutes
Yeah.
isn't much. Like it's relatively not much, but as a mum, it can feel like a really long time.
And compounding, it makes such a difference. Like we're what, 4 months into the year, so like I'm past 100% already.
That's awesome. That's congratulations. Now, just
Thank you.
finishing up, I'm inspired. What's one encouragement you'd love to leave other working mums today about being a working mum?
This too shall pass. It is my guiding light in parenthood, I feel. The good and the bad, like when you've got a for a 5.5-year-old who gets out of bed 4 times a night I've just got to ask you one more thing, mummy. This too shall pass. But when you've got a 3-year-old who holds you on the face and gives you kisses on the lips and says, I love you, mummy, this too shall pass. So just stop and take a moment and cherish that. The good and the bad, this too shall pass.
What great advice. Thank you so much. Now, just quickly, Elise, for that 1%, what do you do to fill your cup?
Something to work on for me, I guess, would be moving my body a bit more. And I'm trying to reframe that out of it being exercise and have it be movement that feels good. So sometimes that's just some deep stretching, other times it's getting out in the fresh air. But when it comes to filling my cup for fresh air, I like to crochet. So that is that's my cup filling exercise every day, is to make sure that I get a bit of crochet time in.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, your experiences of returning back into work, and also some really vulnerable moments there throughout your journey as a working mum. I just want to say thank you so much. I've certainly learned a lot, but also taken a lot of gratitude from it, of actually being so vulnerable for yourself. So thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you if they want to connect?
LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with me. So I think it's just Elise.Slavin, I think.
We'll put it in the show notes. It'll be a link,
Yeah.
so it's all good. Well, as I said, thank you so much for being so open and sharing your experiences, because I know not the return to work for all mums is definitely not smooth. So everyone has their own little rocky path, and something I know I'm pretty passionate about is that return to work process. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Karina.